You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
Hey there, folks. Welcome back to Right Up Meridian. Pacers podcast. Scott here with you, going solo again today. We'll get Tony back on here soon. Gonna have Dustin back on, maybe even Zion. Get a couple other guests we're looking at. But right now, finishing off the year solo. Happy New Year's Eve. Recording this December 30th. We just had the OG Anunoby trade. We'll get to that here in a second. Although it doesn't really relate to the Pacers. Here's the main thing that I wanted to talk about today. Had a couple questions out there and talking to some folks and even kind of listening to some national media. The perception is the Pacers, had a run in the midseason tournament and they've just fallen off since then. And I just want to kind of dig into that a little bit because I think, as we talked about in this pod, in November and December, the Pacers, they had a nice little run in the midseason tournament, no question. But it really comes down to like two games. Like they beat the Celtics and they beat the Bucks. All the other games, they played kind of subpar opponents. Like the first game was against the Cavs. That Cavs team was a little bit injury riddled. I think that was Garland's first or second game back. It's a good win. It's a win at home. They had the back-to-back against the 76ers, and that game, that was kind of what got them the win because the next two games were against the Hawks and the Pistons. The Pistons are basically not even an NBA team right now. But all through that stretch, they were kind of a 500 team. I mean, they're 9-8 going into, or they're set 9-7 going into that Heat, those two games against the Heat before they play the knockout game, and they're 10-8 going into that knockout game. They're basically a 500 team. And like we have talked about, there was a couple games in there where they just really let slip away, like the game against the Hornets, the game against, I'm kind of looking at some of these old losses, the game against the Magic at home, they kind of let slip away. The game against the Raptors at home, they lost by one. They kind of had that game. They had a lot of games where it's like they could have been like 13-5, but they weren't. They're 10-8, and that's fine. And since the in-season tournament, like, yes, the 4-game losing streak isn't awesome, but they're 4-6. They're slightly under a 500 team. My larger takeaway is that's kind of what this team is. This is a 500 team that's going to get up for some big games, that's also going to blow some games that they probably shouldn't. And when they face really stiff competition, sometimes they're not going to be able to match up. And you look at what's happened since the in-season tournament. They beat the Pistons, fine. That's a team that's kind of, again, not an NBA team. It's kind of advocated trying to be a functional NBA franchise. And then their losses were, they had a 3-game road trip after the Pistons. That was the first of a 4-game road trip. So they had 3 more road games. They lost to the Bucks, fine. That was, Ballgate, stealing the Ballgate, whatever. That I'll come back to that in a sec. They lost at the Wizards. That's not a great look, but they lost the Minnesota Timberwolves. Timberwolves are a great team, and they came home and they lost the Clippers. That's a Clippers team that, suddenly got right with Harden. I don't think it's going to last, but it's working right now. All of those losses, except for the Wizards one, are defensible, and, this is a team that's shown up to the point this year, even before the in-season tournament, they will lose some of these games or not. They shouldn't lose. That's kind of the MO of this team. Then they came back, they beat the Hornets, and I don't need to go through game by game there. So, I think it's pretty easy to say, like, hey, man, they were great, but, in-season tournament, they're killing it, and they just fell apart. I don't think they've fallen apart. I think this is who they are. I think this is what they've always been. I think they had a nice little, they had a great win against the 76ers. They had, 2 wins against the Celtics and the Bucks. And really, it's like they had 3 really good games. And that's awesome. Not taking anything away from it. Outside of that, they're a 500 team. And there's also nothing wrong with that. So I just think the narrative of like they were really good and now they suck is just really not true. I will say there is a point in that Bucks game with the, taking the ball and the whole thing with Giannis. I think it goes back, about 2 weeks before that when, Tyrese hit the shot and then did the, Dame time takeoff, kind of like it's my time. I'm fine with all that. The thing is, if you're going to start talking that kind of smack and start kind of getting big for your britches, you've got to be able to back it up. And I think I think this Pacers team, Icarus kind of flew a little bit too close to the sun, talking a little bit too much smack, and then wasn't able to kind of back it up from there. And so I think they're learning from this. I think, Halliburton's learning, how to play with a little more scrutiny on him. Although I will also say, I think that's also a little bit of a misnomer, because if you look at his numbers for the year and you look at his numbers for the last 10 games, they're pretty much the same. He's averaging for the season 34.1 minutes a game. In the last 10, he's averaging 33.6. His offensive rating from the season is 125.1. In the last 10 games, it's 121.8. So a slight decline, but not like a drop. His defensive rating is only down 2 points. He's averaging a little bit less. His assist to turnover ratio is actually higher in the last 10 games, scoring a little bit less points. He's taking, about, instead of 17% of possessions, about, 14% of possessions. The pace has gone down from 104 to 102. It's really minuscule differences. Halliburton isn't playing that much differently. So the idea of like, teams are just defending him differently and now they're being stopped, but not really. Like, he's playing about the same. I think the rest of the team is struggling. You've had some injury issues, and I think you've also just had a schedule where you're playing some really, really tough teams. All of that said, having gone to the game against the Magic the other night, Halliburton does look a little bit tired at times. Like, he looks a little bit worn down. He has the most minutes of anybody on the team. He's averaging 34.1. Right behind him is Bruce Brown, 30.7, although he's been injured. This is, games played, he's at 27. Only Buddy Hield and a couple others like Miles Turner have played more. This is something the Pacers need to keep an eye out for, of, just running him a little bit too close to empty. And this time of year, I always think of there was a book about like the late 90s Blazers, the early 2000s Blazers, those the Trailblazers. And I just remember this story. I think it was from Steve Kerr. Was they were on the plane about 2 weeks ago, early December, and Zach Randolph, who Indiana kid, went to Michigan State, was a freshman, was a rookie on that team. And basically it was kind of like, well, when do we get a break, man? Like, I'm getting, it's kind of getting like a lot of travel, a lot of games. Like, when do we get our Christmas break? We get a couple days off for Christmas. And Kerr's like, no, man, this ain't college. Like, we go, like, we're going, and we get a break in April. And I do think, obviously Halliburton's not a rookie. He understands that. But I always think about that at this time of year. Some of the, younger guys kind of being like, man, it'd be nice to have a break now. And I think everybody's like, kind of like, this is where you get into the doldrums, where you kind of got to dig it out. This is where teams, you can stack up some wins. You can also stack up some losses. So you have all of that. The other question that, I've gotten and I've heard that I want to get to is about, what the Pacers should do. So today, before I'm recording this, OG Anunoby came out that he's getting traded to the Knicks. Kind of a nice win for the Pacers. They're playing the Knicks tonight. I will be at that game. So they traded RJ Barrett, I think Emmanuel Moody. I'm not sure. I don't have it pulled up in like a second round pick. But, if the trade is approved today, more than likely RJ Barrett's not going to play. The guys who, the Knicks traded are not going to be playing. And I don't believe OG Anunoby is going to have time to get there, clear his physical, and have the trade approved and be able to play for the Knicks tonight. So the Pacers get a really nice opportunity here to basically get an undermanned Knicks team. So I hope they can take advantage of it. But the question is, what should the Pacers do? Should they be moving to move up? Should they be moving to move down, try to tank? Here's the thing. I think you have to look at the standings in the East, and it'll really help you understand that, I think the Pacers do need to do something about Buddy Hield and TJ McConnell, if only you don't want to lose assets for nothing. So I'll come back to the schedule in a second, but you look at, TJ McConnell is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. Let me pull up his contract. He's got one more year. I apologize. Buddy Hield is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. He's making $19 million a year. Jordan Noir is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. Not as big of a deal, $3 million. Buddy Hield is a guy you've got to get something for, or you've got to decide what you want to do with Buddy Hield. I think this is all kind of, regardless of whether you're going to make the playoffs or not, You just can't let Buddy Hield walk. I also am not sure. I love the way Buddy Hield plays with Halliburton. I think the three-point shooting is a great, him and Halliburton have a great two-man game. He knows where to go to get open for Halliburton. I think having a dead-eye three-point shooter is a real plus for a guy like Halliburton. I don't think that you can afford to be paying Buddy Hield $20 to $25 million a year for where this team is at. And I'm honestly not sure that guys like Buddy Hield are going to be making that kind of money in the future. It's a totally different podcast. We'll get into it at some point, but look at the way the salary cap is set up. Look at the aprons. Look at teams, the Celtics are a bad example because they're kind of still working under the old framework, but the salary cap's like 140, 150. When you have two guys making, almost 80 to 90% of that, maybe not that much, but when you have Halliburton is going to be making $41 million in 3 years. And he deserves all of it. If you get another star, that's another $40 to $45 million. Right there is $85 million of your, 120, 130 salary cap. You can't also then have a dude like Buddy Hield making 20, because then the rest of your lineup is going to be $3 million guys, which is, you're talking, rookies like Ben Shepherd, guys like Nembhard, who's been awesome, but you're going to have to really, dig the barrel, and everyone's going to be in that spot. So I think the days of having, 4 guys on your team making 20 million are done, because you're going to have 2 guys on your team making 40 to 45 million and eating up a majority of your cap space. Anyway, side note, that is why you need to get something for Hield, and I do think they're probably going to move him, because I just don't think you're going to be able to sign Hield for like $7 to $10 million. I think that's what a player like that is going to be making under the new salary cap ways. I think you're just going to have two high paid players and a bunch of guys making 7 to 10. But it's going to take some time to shake out. And guys like Hield are not going to be like, that's cool. I love the new arrangement. I love being a guy making $7 million. I just don't think the Pacers can pay that, unless maybe you go with like a 2-year contract or something. But you got to figure something out. So I do think you got to move on Hield. But let's go back to the standings. What should the Pacers do? You look at the standings. Top 6 teams in the East, and I know this is kind of like what we all know, but it's informative to kind of look through it and dig into it a little bit. The top 6 teams in the East are automatically given a playoff berth. Spots 7 through 10 are in the play-in, and then everything under that is obviously not making the playoffs. So here's the thing. I think it's safe to say, even right now, I think the Pacers are pretty much locked into the play-in, and here's why. At the bottom of the East, you have the Pistons, who are 2-29. The Pacers are not getting under that. The Wizards are 6-25, and albeit the Wizards did beat the Pacers a couple weeks ago, the Wizards are also a hot mess. I don't think the Pacers are going to get under that. The Hornets are 7-23. I don't think the Pacers are going to get under that. Like, they're not going to lose enough to be under that. And then the Raptors, who've kind of been this weird team since they won the title of like, hey, we're not going to trade guys. We're going to kind of compete, be tough. They just traded OG, which tells me, that I would assume that, Siakam is going to be traded next, but they are trading guys out. They're probably not going to have Siakam, so I don't think the Raptors are going to be trying exceptionally hard and have all the pieces of a 12-19 team. I think they're going to be getting a little bit worse and probably tanking. All that said, too, the Pacers have a 5-game lead over that team. I don't think they're going to get under there. But basically, you have 5 spots in the East that are not making the play-in or the playoffs. The Pistons, the Wizards, and the Hornets are locked into 3 of those spots. So there's only 2 spots open, and I think the Raptors are just showing that they're going to lock one of those spots up. So now you have 1 spot. You got 1 spot. The Hawks are 12-19. The Bulls are 14-19. The Nets are 15-17. Pacers are 16-14. The Knicks are 17-14. I think of all those teams, the Hawks are in the spot now where they're out. I just don't see how the Hawks are going to get better. They have issues. Like, do they need to trade, Murray? Like, what are they going to do with their team? There's a lot of trade rumors swirling around about the Hawks. They might just tank it out, and then it's like it's locked up. The Bulls, they've done better with LaVine out. LaVine's going to come back. How's that going to happen? They might be better if they trade LaVine. We don't know. the Nets are in a unique spot. They have none of their first-round picks, so they have no reason to tank, so they'll be in this mix. All that said, I just don't think there's a world if you say, hey, I think the Pacers, should just, trade a bunch of guys away and tank this year. Like, I'd say for what? Like, at this point, they might still make the play-in even if they trade 3 dudes for a bunch of picks. So I think you're locked into that. Now, on the top end, here's the other way to look at it. Top of the East, you got the Celtics, the Bucks, and the 76ers. 25-6, 24-8, 22-9, respectively. I don't think the Pacers are getting above any of those teams. They're not going to take those 3 spots away. Also above them, you have the Heat, the Magic, and the Cavs. The Heat are just a better team. They're 19-12. I think they're going to stay in that race up near the top. We just saw the Magic. The Magic beat the Pacers by 50 at home or 40. They just beat them a couple weeks ago. I think the Magic are a young team who are slightly ahead of the curve and have some pieces the Pacers don't. They're 19-12. The Cavs are the one that I'm not sure about. They're 18-14, but they've done that while having some injuries and also not sure. Mitchell may not be there the rest of the year. Who knows? And the Knicks, like we said, 17-14, just theoretically got better with OG, especially having a coach like Tibbs who knows defense and can plug him in. All that said, there's a world where maybe the Pacers can sniff the 6th seed, maybe the 5th seed, but the Pacers have been a really inconsistent team so far this year. 16-14, I mean, you're getting close to, you're a third of the way through the season, if not closer to, you're getting closer to halfway through the season. They are who they are. I don't think they're going to get more consistent, and trading away a bunch of pieces for one more piece, I'm not sure makes them more consistent. And again, even if we're just playing, complete fantasy here, but if you trade a bunch of pieces for a highly, you get Siakam. I don't know what you give up. Siakam and Halliburton, does that make you better than the Heat? I don't think so. Sixers, Bucks, Celtics, I don't think so. So basically, the highest you're going to get is the 5th seed. So they're kind of locked into this like 5th to 9. And I end all this by saying that's fine. Like, that's actually a really not bad place to be. You're going to be in the play-in. That's great. And so I don't think the Pacers need to do anything. Let this team go. And I also think we're in a unique spot, like I've said before, and I will say again throughout the rest of this year. I think, gosh, basketball gods strike me down because I've always said, we never get free agents here in Indiana. The best free agent we've gotten is David West. So that's probably the right way to look at it. But there is a feel like, you read the stuff from Obi Toppin in the offseason of last year where he's like, I want to play with Halliburton. I do hope and wonder, is Halliburton going to be a draw for some guys? Like maybe a guy like Siakam or Paul George or, the recently traded OG Anunoby. Maybe one of them is like, hey, man, like Indiana looks like a fun, I've never thought of him before, but like I would like to play with Halliburton. Because in the end, some guys go to play with places. LeBron said he went to South Beach. He went there because he had Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. And he went to L.A. because he knew that they'd be able to get Anthony Davis. Like, guys go to play with guys. And if you're another player and you look at, like, dude, Obi Toppin's career has been resurrected. You look at, Miles Turner is playing the best he's ever played. All of these things are, due in part to the way that Rick Carlisle coaches his team, but really due in part to the way that Halliburton runs this team. So my hope is that, maybe they're able to get one of these guys in free agency this year. Or, like I said, next year, Maury Markkanen is a free agent next year. The class of the next summer is interesting too, but now we're getting deep off the radar. All that said, I wouldn't be like, I've already seen online like, oh God, the Knicks have inside track on, getting OG to re-sign there. It's like, okay, maybe not. Like the Knicks have had as bad of a history getting free agents as Indiana. So, it has New York, but that hasn't worked for 20 years. I'm not sure it's going to work now. Do they have a facilitator? They have Brunson. OG will see, but I think there's something with Halliburton. I think he might be able to draw somebody here. So if I'm the Pacers, you don't want to lose Hield for nothing, but I don't think you need to spend all your dry powder now. Go for the offseason. See if Halliburton's able to draw somebody. And if he doesn't, when you look at the contracts for next year, I know I already screwed this up, but next year, so next season, McConnell will be an expiring contract, so that will be interesting. I mean, God, things happen fast. Miles Turner will be an expiring contract. So he becomes a unrestricted free agent in 25, 26. So next season is his last year under contract. Bruce Brown, if we pick up the club option, he will be an expiring contract. We'll probably get the extension on Matherin, so that's not going to be an issue. Halliburton's into his deal and it's going down. Jalen Smith will be an expiring contract. There's a lot of pieces next year that you can look at like doing something. So if I'm the Pacers, like, look, next year is a year you got to figure some stuff out. You're going to have a lot of pieces to move. Maybe you can put all the chips in. I would say let's hold pat, because really when you look at the standings, I don't think there's really any way to move up. If you're making a move and you're trading a bunch of your assets, you damn well better think you can get in the top 4 of your conference. And I don't think the Pacers can do that. And if you're going to trade away all of your assets to suck, you damn well better get in the bottom 3 of your conference. And I don't think the Pacers can do that either. They're stuck right in the middle, which is not a great place to be, but it's a great place for where this team needs to be. They need to play in the play-in. They need to try and get some playoff experience. They're going to do that. And I really think they're going to do it regardless of what they do move-wise. So I think don't make a move one way or the other. The only thing you got to worry about is Hield and just trying to get value for it, or trying to get him locked up in a team-friendly contract. So hope that's helpful. Hope that gives you something to think about. And hopefully the Pacers can beat the Knicks tonight. It's really sitting there as a very gettable win, because when you look at the schedule coming up after that, man, it does not get easy. For all the people who were worried about the Pacers not looking good after the end season, get ready, boys, because you come back after the Knicks game. January 1st, you're at the Bucks, and January 3rd, you're home to the Bucks. You have a back-to-back Bucks game. I don't like these at all, but whatever. The NBA has lots of them. Well, we'll have another one coming up in like 2 weeks I'll tell you about. I'm worried about these 2 games. I think the Bucks have the Pacers on their calendar, and they're like, fuck those guys. Like the ball thing, like Giannis, bet the Giannis point over. I'm worried about all future Bucks games against the Pacers. I think the Pacers might have gotten a little bit too big for their britches at this point, so they're going to have to take their medicine here. Okay, so you have those 2. Then you're home to the Hawks. One of those games that's like, it looks like it should be a win. It's one of those games the Pacers have fumbled throughout the year, so I worry, because then you stay home, but you have a back-to-back Hawks, and then you're playing the Celtics, a night off, and the Celtics. So you go, I mean, dude, you have a home stretch where it's January 3rd, Bucks, January 5th, Hawks, January 6th, Celtics, January 8th, Celtics, January 10th, Wizards. That's tough, man. You got to win the Hawks and the Wizards game, and even doing that, you're 2-4 on a home state, or 2-4 on a 6-game stretch, 5 of them being at home. You got to win those 2 games, because then after that Wizards game, you got a West Coast road trip where you start in Atlanta. I don't know, it's not really West Coast. Then you go Atlanta to the Nuggets to the Jazz. Nuggets, Jazz, back-to-back. Kings, Blazers, Suns. By the way, the Kings and the Blazers, back-to-back. Jesus, it gets really rough really quick. You can't. I mean, you got to find a way to win 2 or 3 of those games on the road trip as well, but I don't know, man. Like, the Jazz are playing better. The Nuggets are obviously good. The Kings are going to run. The Blazers, they should beat them, but they lost to them at home. And then the Suns, they have a lot, I don't know how you're going to guard a Durant, Booker combo. And then you come home after that, and you're playing the Nuggets, the 76ers, the Suns, and the Grizzlies again. So the schedule gets unbelievably gnarly. You don't see the Pistons again until February 22nd. Like, that's an oasis in the calendar. All that said, the schedule is getting really rough here. You've got to pick up some wins. You've got to just try and keep your head in that 500 range. And really, the team you got to look at is the Hawks, the Bulls, and the Nets. Those are the teams that you're fighting with for that last spot that's not in the play-in. So I think the Raptors, Hornets, Wizards, and Pistons are going to lose enough games to not be a problem. It's of those 4 teams, Pacers, Nets, Bulls, Hawks, maybe the Knicks. Those 5 are fighting for 4 spots. You got to get one of those, and you're going to have to go 500 in the stretch. You're going to have to pick up some wins against some of the big boys, and it's coming. But they've shown an ability to do it. They've also shown an ability to kick away games they should win. I think that's what we're probably going to see, and I think next time we pod, they'll probably still be 500, so I would tell everyone just to calm down. Don't worry. that is what this team is, and that'll be fine, and that should be more than enough to get us into the play-in, which is where I think this team should be this year. Anyway, I appreciate everybody listening. Please send in questions, RightUpMeridian@gmail.com. I'll answer them on the next podcast, and we'll be doing this, trying to get it done weekly into the new year, starting in 2024. Look forward to talking with you then, and until next time, this is Scott for the Right Up Meridian podcast, signing off.